Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for making time for a very important conversation with a potential candidate for running the European Commission, Nicolas Schmit. Before I start, I want to acknowledge what's obviously happened in our neighbourhood in the past hour, the shooting of a Prime Minister in daylight. And I think it's important that when we're having a conversation about democracy and the quality of democracy, we shouldn't be the Wild West. And how do we make sure that, regardless of people's views or attitudes or concerns, people, prime ministers, or even members of the public should not be open season for people taking guns in their own hands. And I think that we need to acknowledge the seriousness of the situation. And it just perhaps it's a leitmotif of how polarized some of the situations are, some of the concerns people have, and what people will do in the context of their concerns and what matters to them, and take to the heart. But that should not result in violence. So, I mean, on that somber note, it's good that we have here today a conversation with Nicolas. He's the Common Candidate for the European Socialist Party. I know you've got your branded material with you. By way of context, I wanted to say a little bit about why this is important from Friends of Europe's point of view. This year, we launched 2 reports, and they're significant insofar as they're a piece of work that we worked over a couple of years, and in particular last year. One is that we engaged with 2,024 citizens in 7 key markets in Europe last year, and we asked them very specific questions about their concerns around the planet, security, what they feel about how actions are having an effect or not in terms of our security, our climate, their livelihoods, etc. So that's a report which is voices, 24 voices. And second, it's a compendium, as a let's say that's the citizen's voice. And what we've layered that with is this document, which is our 10 policy choices for the new mandate. So in this document, what we've done is we've crowdsourced ideas from hundreds of people, hundreds of networks, and both current politicians or people in policy, previous, etc., and so forth, commissioners, ex-commissioners. We've covered all over Europe, but we also consulted globally. And we came up with 10 policy choices for the new EU mandate. And the bottom line for us is that we're living in a world that is not recognizable to most of us who've lived for the past 50, 60 years or 70 years. We're in a different kind of vortex. And we feel that some of the rules that we've inherited or put in place since the 1940s are simply not fit for purpose in this part of the century and as we move forward. We believe that there needs to be a renewed social contract. And by that, we mean making sure we're clear about the responsibilities between government, the private sector, and citizens. What can we expect of each other? Who should be responsible for what? And who should be accountable? And we believe a renewed social contract is the way forward. So we urge you to read this and download it. You can get copies of it at the back. I'm assuming you can pick up a copy, but do take time to read it. It's a labour of love, and I hope that you think it's thoughtful. But I suppose what we're doing is we are hatching different ideas of how societies and economies should work. And what we're promoting here is a very different model of economics and governance, and we make recommendations in here for how the EU might be reformed in the future. So I'm going to give them both to you right now. Take a picture. There you go. We have to brand it. Because should you be elected, we expect you to be able to take some of this on. And obviously, as Nicolas is just telling me, he's been doing a road show. He's been traveling all over Europe, and tonight, poor chap's having to go to Romania, then he's going to Greece, then he's going to France. So he's on the road. So you have plenty of reading time.
Oh, that's part of democracy.
Exactly, absolutely. But I'm more concerned that you've got reading time on your plane and trains, so you'll be able to take account of that. So firstly, thank you very much for being with us. In terms of what we'll do in this hour that we have, it'll go very quickly. So firstly, thank you for turning up at this time, because it's not always guaranteed that you're going to show up, so we're really pleased that you're here. What I'm going to do is have a conversation with Nicolas first about issues about democracy, security, climate, etc., for about 10, 15 minutes, and then I'm going to open the floor to you and for you to hopefully ask questions of him, because it's a very important role, it's a hugely accountable role, and it's one which will shape the future of Europe and its relationship with the rest of the world. And that's That's what's at stake here. And that's what's important in terms of us considering Mr. Schmit as a potential candidate. And so this is not, we're not going to grill you at all. This is about you being able to share your vision for the future of Europe and what you would do if you had the top job. So firstly, thank you for being here. My first question is about citizens and democracy and citizen engagement. You know very well, because I mean, the things you've done on the social pillar and the social dimension have been, really thoughtful, and you've taken the agenda forward. And you know more than anybody else in the college that the disconnect and the trust issues are significant right now, given all that's happened, both from COVID through to, what's happening right now in the war in Ukraine, what's happening in Gaza, but also we've seen hideous examples of, let's say, corruption amongst politicians. All of that puts in the food mixer and turns up a cake of lack of trust. What would you do to improve processes, but democratic engagement, which is more empowering and more sort of fulfilling?
Well, first, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure, because this is also a democratic exercise. It's part of the great moments of European democracy, that people who want a job, who want to have an important position, go back to citizens and listen and discuss with citizens. So thank you also to Friends of Europe for organizing this. Now, I have just to say one word on what has happened today in Slovakia. This is unfortunately something which is extremely scary, because we have seen a week ago, or a bit more than a week ago, attacks against politicians in Germany. We see it nearly every day, where politicians or candidates are attacked. And this is really the negation of democratic culture, because this is shown that in our society, violence is more and more, also in the political field, is more and more developing. And so I express my solidarity with the victim, Prime Minister Fico, and really we have to reflect on this issue of violence. And violence starts not with beating or shooting. Violence starts with words. So this is something very important, also in our debates, in the way how we exchange and the way how we name also our political adversaries. They are not our enemies, our adversaries. This is important also, the choice of words, and this is something which has dramatically changed in a negative sense during the last years. So just to say that. Now, I think first, this crisis of democracy, which we are going through, is not just applying to the European Union. Otherwise, well, I would say there's just a problem at the level of European Union. Unfortunately, it's a crisis of democracy at all levels, and especially at national level. It's not something limited to Europe. We see this crisis in other parts of the world, in democracies. We see it very obviously in the US. And this is obviously a real danger, because this shows that democracies are mortal. And they are. We have seen that in the 30s, and we have really to do something about that. So how to reconnect? It's very strange that in a society where everything is connected, where everybody can connect and have all kinds of instant information, there is this growing gap between the deciders, the decision takers, and the public and the citizens. So how can we improve that? This is the big question. Probably not by doing more things on internet. I'm not so sure about that. I think it's first the perception citizens have of institutions, because it's the idea of the institutions are disconnected. They are disconnected from my problems, from my concerns, from my daily life. So I think that we have to reflect how commissioners. I'm traveling now a lot because I am the candidate, but I normally travel a lot, and I always try to meet people, to have this kind of exchanges. Certainly, I cannot talk to 450 million Europeans, but really the way how we are talking, and this at all levels. It's about the commissioners, it's about the members of the European Parliament, it's about other members of European institutions or organizations. So I think this is essential to have this contact and also listening. The second one is about the way how we are preparing our decisions. And here I think there is margin for improvement.
Mm-hmm.
We have seen, I'm a big fan, obviously, an absolute fan of the Green Deal. But I think we should have started in connecting much more with the citizens, with all the stakeholders, employers, employees, people in the countryside, the farmers, discussing about it. We thought that because the young people were on the street and they said we cannot go on as we have, and we have responded by a very ambitious plan, that things were settled. Well, all respect for the young. Without the young, probably we would not stand where we are. But it was not enough. So I think I am very much proposing a much more open institution, especially also Commission, a stronger dialogue, social dialogue, but also dialogue with civil society, especially on the big projects, on the big issues we are treating. And this is something which costs some energy, but which has to be done by commissioners, including also by the president of the commission. So I think the law tried to do it very much, trying to explain, not easy, not always successful, I agree, but this is something we have, the way how the institution is perceived through the different personalities is very important.
Okay. In the report Voices, 2024 Voices, one of the big themes that came out was, it's quite surprising, citizens felt that they believed in institutions, so they think that the EU is a good thing, right? And some of the institutional infrastructure we have, they just don't trust politicians to make the right decisions. And they have high lack of faith in the integrity. So whilst you've answered my question to a certain extent, specifically, what would you do? Will you mandate commissioners to make sure they're out there on the field? Will you create a different kind of structure for making sure that citizens are engaged with, much like, let's not talk about the big conversation about the future of Europe, but there are ways and modalities that could enhance engagement. What would you do specifically? Especially with, let's say, the commissioners. Would you mandate them differently, like the letters there that Ursula von der Leyen issued, asking for policy coherence? Will you ask for citizen engagement as a deal?
Well, certainly I think we have to find the right way to associate, to have better participation of citizens, to, as I said, a more open institution, talking about the Commission. Well, what comes to my mind, and it's very strange, you know how Roosevelt behaved for the Green, the Great Deal, or was it? He had very frequent, I don't know if it's every week or every few days, he had this conversation explaining his policies. Well, that was at the time where we had no internet, we had no fake news and all that. That's true. But finally, I think the connection with those who are at the top and the people is essential. Now, the way is how to organize, how to find this connection, how to find this dialogue, and how to well, we are not somewhere on a big mountain and the citizens are down.
Indeed.
We have to climb down our mountain if we are on a mountain. Imagine it's more difficult to be on the mountain, but to go in with citizens and not shy away from this kind of permanent exchange and dialogue.
Indeed. I think one of the things that we're hearing from our citizens is they didn't articulate it. Like, this is my articulation of the summation of some of the issues, is that we seem to have lost the concept of public service. That what does public duty and public service really mean in the modern day? I'm not asking you to answer, but I'm just saying this is a key message, that if in terms of being able to redress the trust deficit, the concept of public service needs to be ratcheted up in different ways. Let's move to economy. We know that where we are at the moment, it's not necessarily strong. The recovery is not there yet. People, because of the double whammy of COVID, the war, the energy crisis, etc., there are people here today in this world of ours who are making choices between fuel or food. We're seeing homelessness rise and go through the roof, and mental health on our streets is quite burgeoning. What measures would you like to put into place to ensure that we have an economic model that's both competitive and inclusive?
Well, first I would say the economy is not at its best. True, but it's not at its worst either. When I look at many companies around Europe, they are doing quite well. They are doing quite well.
I'm talking about the households who can't feed themselves.
But you know, the households and the economy, there's some linkage between. Because at the end, the households, they live on the salaries, the wages they get from the economy. So I think that the first thing is there has to be some fair way how the gains are distributed. And the first thing is about wages. Wages are important, you know, because for many people, for the majority of people, they live on their wage. And if the wage does not really allow a decent life, there is a problem. There is distrust. There is something which people cannot accept. For those who work a lot of hours, those who are out sometimes with difficult jobs, overtime and so on, and they cannot make it. They cannot make ends meet. This is a very, very big frustration. So I think we have really to talk about wages. That's, by the way, what I have done by the proposal of minimum wage, but also collective bargaining, to try to come back to some more normal distribution of wealth produced between the different, let's be an economist, between the factors of production, being labor and capital. I think we have seen labor going down constantly during the last years, decades. We have to restore some new balance here. I think this is the first thing, because the second one is about taxation, obviously.
Good. Okay.
Taxation
will be my
is
second
important.
question. Yes.
Yes, because if you can have high wealth and you do not pay tax or very low tax, you know, it's the famous phrase of this American investor saying, I know that I pay less tax than my secretary. This is not normal. So I think this is about taxation. It's about redistribution. And the third one is about functioning public services. This is very, very important in our societies. When people get the impression that the health system doesn't function, that the schools do not function anymore, that the basic public services are in a situation which does not deliver on their needs, this is also a big issue which we have to restore.
So you'd push for tax reform and redistribution?
Well, yes, obviously. When I look at, I've seen recently in France, we had the distribution of dividends. We have the share buybacks by big companies. Now, they are not a few billion. They're hundreds of billions.
Yes.
And this shows, that's why I say the economy does not go so badly. Otherwise, these dividends could not be paid. So I think we have to find a new balance between wages and other remuneration of capital through dividends or other ways. So I think this seems to me important if we, by the way, it's not just about social. It's also about the economy.
It is.
It's also about the economy, because that's also what Europe needs to find a bit more. By the way, during the last years, the situation was terrible in the US. It has improved in the US. Wages have gone up more rapidly in the US than in Europe.
Yeah, so you wouldn't do a trade-off between social protection and competition, economic growth?
No, I would not say we can build Europe's competition on low social conditions or on low wages. This is not the economy Europe needs.
Okay.
So what we need is investing in knowledge, investing in skills, upskilling. Finally, it's about productivity. You know, we have one big issue in Europe. That's the demographic issue. We are now in a situation of shortage of labor. So what are the solutions? Among the solutions, I do not say the solution. Among the solution, it's increasing productivity. Productivity of labor means better investing in technology, obviously, but also investing in people's skills. And this means also better wages. When we talk then about how can we distribute or how should we distribute productivity gains.
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, I was going to ask, intercept it with views from citizens, and there's 2,024 citizens will vote for you, because actually what they want is tax reform and redistribution. They want fair wages and a minimum wage as the vision for the future, because that way, as you say, it's about their stability and improving their security. So good on you, and hope you follow through. But this is being recorded, by the way, so we will hold you if you get the top job. But it's a really important one.
What I say here, I would try to do it.
Of course.
I say it.
Absolutely. No, Nicolas, we know that. But, you know, there is this issue that in adversity and force majeure has created the biggest profit margins for about the top 10 companies in the world, and they've earned more profit in the past 2 years than the past 10 years. So something has to give in that regard, and I hope that you are bold enough to do something around how you think about social clauses and tax redistribution in certain ways. And again, just to plug it, if you want to know more about that, it's in here in the 10 policy choices. We have a whole section on tax reform.
I haven't read it.
I know exactly. That's what I'm saying. You're on message.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
You referred in your remarks just now about technical digitalization. Can we talk about the transition, digitalization transition? We know that about 60% of households in rural communities have access to in the internet. We know older people struggle with being digitally literate, and you've got a young population that is consuming their whole lives digitally. So there are divides in there. There's also the bulwark of Europe is small to medium enterprises. A lot of them are struggling with the digital transition. We know that. You know that. Absolutely. The big ones are okay, right? But the small ones don't have the dosh or the wherewithal to actually transition. What kind of things will you put in place, or have a conversation about the digital transition to make it fair and equitable?
Well, first, I think we have to promote digital inclusion. So giving people the opportunity to have at least a basic digital knowledge, and that's independently from their social position, their job, or their age. This is important, because when you are a client at your bank in Belgium, for instance, it becomes more and more difficult, because banks do not exist anymore. The bank is in your pocket. So it's digitalized. So we have really to help people to have this basic skills, digital skills. So this is part of, I would say, a normal education or permanent education we should promote. By the way, we should always, as we are in this transition, we should always keep possibilities for those who are not at this digital level. That's clear. This is also a social obligation for elderly people or those who are not up to the level. The second one is, well, we have really to make tremendous efforts to give a fair and good digital education to everybody, for the workers of today as for the workers of tomorrow. So this starts at school, this starts also at lifelong learning, because industries are changing, services are changing. Wherever you work, there is some digital component. So we have to create this right of digital training, digital skills. Now, everybody, that was always my idea when I was a labor minister, everybody who is unemployed, during the period of unemployment, every person should get the possibility, and I would even say some kind of obligation, to follow digital skills, digital training, up to the level people can do. Well, we will not transform them all into digital engineers, but giving them a digital training for everybody. So this is, I think, the way how we can do it. In order to close these gaps you have described between the young generation, but even the young generation, you know, they are very good on internet for games and many things, but this does not mean that they are good when digital has to be employed in the job. So this is another issue which we have to look at, but also schools here have to make some further progress.
Indeed. One of the things that our citizens communicated as a kind of big issue is AI is a mixed blessing. They can see the potential and the positiveness of it, but also feeling very insecure and vulnerable about its potential to shape lives. What are you planning to do? What would you do to think about AI into the future as a regulator?
Well, I think AI has these two faces. The face that indeed AI can be very, very helpful in many areas. When we are talking about medicine, for instance, AI can really help us a lot. Well, perhaps not for radiologists because we will need a bit less radiologists, but at least it will ease the work of many doctors, of many people in the health sector. So this is the positive side. And this applies to many other jobs. Being in a context of shortage of labor and shortage of demographic limits. But AI can also take control. Now, I'm not among those who, strangely like Musk and others, say, well, AI will dominate the world and so on. But there are dangers that people will be under control of the machine. It's not the person controlling the machine, but it's really the machine controlling workers, for instance. So I think here we have to set the right limits, the right rules. We have done it now. We have this AI Act, which has a risk assessment, which has this approach based on risk assessment, which is good, interesting. On the other hand, we have introduced this idea of algorithms not being able to rule persons without the possibility for workers to come back to a human. This is what we have put into the platform, in the platform directive, limited to platforms. But it should not be limited to platforms. It should go for any other company or service where algorithms are used, that we really trace the limit, where we say what algorithms are able to do, how transparency, how algorithms are programmed, because that's the big issue.
Indeed.
About programming. And so it's always the issue of human-centered. At the end, human has to prevail. Now, this is a cultural issue, because that's something which should be obvious in our democracies. The Chinese probably have a different view on that. And this is what divides us, or what distinguishes us from authoritarian regimes that use algorithms, observation, face observation, and also to control. We should use algorithms, artificial intelligence, finally to help, to sometimes to replace, because if people can be replaced because they have a difficult job, they have a dangerous job by robots and by AI, why not? Why not? So this is another economic issue, social issue. But the fact is, we should not be controlled by them. We should, at the end, always control.
Sure. One of the key concerns that came out of the 2024 Voices was about the threat to democracy. People's concern that we are living in the year of, one of the biggest, I suppose, democratic votes of the world, if you're over half the world. It could be the festival of disinformation and misinformation at the same time.
This is
what would you do? In terms of
this is the biggest issue about external interferences. We are already we believe that we are not in a war. Yes, we are not in the war like the Ukrainians are, But we are in some kind of a war, which is the control, which are the interferences of the Russians, obviously, but not only the Russians. Other powers play a similar role, a similar game, using algorithms, using artificial intelligence, producing fake news. So I think we have to protect ourselves against that. The Commission has proposed the DSA, the DMA, is that now it's now about implementation. It's about implementation because most of, by the way, the big gig companies are not European. They are mainly American. Some are already Chinese. And here we have to establish standards. It's not to limit the development. It's not to break our potential, but it is to have a certain conception of our society and especially also to keep our democracy alive, because that's a real threat for democracy. And we see it with fake news taking more and more importance, leading then sometimes to the violence we have discussed at the beginning.
I'm putting your notice on this is my last question to him. It's about security and defense, and I'm coming to you. So be ready, because use your time here. Hopefully you're not going to just be passengers, but engage with him and share your views. What's your vision for security and defense policy in the EU? A lot of the citizens we've consulted are more concerned at the moment about polarization. They're more worried about internal threats rather than external threats, ironically. Because they're, I suppose, on the streets, and what they're feeling is, what can you do to make sure that we don't have terrorists, that the people feel secure on the streets, as well as making sure that polarization doesn't consume community cohesion?
Well, I think there are the two aspects of security. When I talk about security, I never limit to external security. I do not look at one aspect of security, which is real, which is obviously something which happens at our borders. There is a war at our border, and this war is against Ukraine, but it's also against democracy in Georgia. It's a war led against also our democratic European or Western, call it as you want, values. So this is one aspect that we have to take care of, and I think Europe has really to do something on its own security. But the internal security is very much linked to that. We have talked about the interferences, we have talked about sabotage, we have talked about terrorism. Nobody knows exactly who is financing the terrorism. We know from the past that some powers have helped terrorists and financed terrorists. So this is also an issue. We cannot separate absolutely the internal threat from the external threat.
Sure.
And here Europe has to do more, has to work more together. We have to cooperate more, but also we have to keep our societies together, because security is also about cohesion of our societies. If our societies fall apart, well, I would not say it's uniquely one of the consequences. Maybe terrorism, maybe radicalization, maybe influences from outside, but it makes it more likely that this is the case. So I link the cohesion, the social cohesion in our society also to our overall security situation, and that's why it's important to invest in our cohesion, because this is also an investment in our security. Well, we know that in areas where the living conditions, where the housing, where all kinds of jobs are not there, well, there is radicalization, there is crime, there is drug trafficking. So these are things which are linked, plus the external aspect, but even both have some common ground.
If you were to secure the mandate, would security and defense policy be up there as one of your big 3 or 5?
Well, I am very clear. First, we have this challenge of the war in Ukraine.
Indeed.
And I think that Europe has to do whatever it takes and how long it takes to support by all means Ukraine. And this means we have to go faster. We have to move faster in building up also our defense capacities. And this means also industrial capacities, because for the time being, when we are talking about defense capacities, we have to look around 80% coming mainly from the US, but not only, but mainly. So I think Europe needs, unfortunately, I always say unfortunately, I would like this money to be invested in other things, be it in accelerating the Green Deal, be it with our southern neighbors. But the fact is we have not chosen the policies because the policies have been imposed from Putin to us, and the aggression comes from there. So we have to do more. So I'm confident that we keep NATO. I think NATO is a good thing. Europe has to play a more important role there, because there is also a question mark there, because nobody knows exactly what will happen on the 6th of November in the US. And we cannot just say, hopefully in Wisconsin, there will be the right number of votes for Biden and not for Trump.
Indeed.
Because it might be then a decision which goes in not in the interest of Europe. So Europe has to do more, and we have to do it urgently.
Yes.
And I always say, could you imagine Winston Churchill in 1940 asking the question, well, can I afford now to continue the war against Hitler? Could you imagine? No. He said, we have to defend ourselves. We have to continue. We are alone. UK was alone. He did it. And this is what Europe has now to do it. We have to be bold on that, inclusive, including also that we know that it will have a cost. But I think we can shoulder that.
Okay, thank you. I take most of what you said about Winston, but he also did do some turncoat beforehand. But you're right, he came to the right conclusion at the end of the day. Colleagues, over to you. Oh, excellent. Okay, good. I was going to say 3 men. We've got women too. Excellent. Gentleman here, gentleman there, and then I'll take you there and at the back with the glasses. Then I'll come to all of you, I promise you. As much as I can. It means that be good citizens to each other. Short.
Yes, thank you. My name is Wienand Kwaadsvlieg from Dutch Confederation of Industries. Commissioner, nice to meet you again. I think you gave a very good, very complete presentation, but there's one big issue you didn't mention, and that is enlargement. How should we, as European Union, in the coming 5 years, manage that challenge? Thank you.
What's your biggest concern about enlargement as an industry, Walla?
Oh, there are very many concerns. It's how do you manage it institutionally? How do you do it with the internal market? How do you do it politically? How do you do it socially?
Okay, you're being a politician here.
Yeah.
In terms of what I'm saying is, do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, enlargement?
I think when it succeeds, it is a good thing.
Okay, you should be a politician. Gentleman with the glass. I'll come back to you with the 3. Let me take 3, 4, and then we come back to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Commissioner Schmit, for your views so far. My name is Quinten Galland. I'm Regulatory Affairs and Public Affairs Director for Knauf Insulation, so a company that manufactures insulation materials. So I'll stop here for the promotion of the company. My question regards housing. So we have talked about many crises, but we've not touched upon housing. So how would you put in the next Commission mandate housing at the heart of the Commission mandate?
And do you mean social housing?
Any type of housing, but social housing first, and then...
Because you know that most people in Spain,
Indeed.
Portugal, elsewhere, well, you look very young, but if you're 25 to 30, you're still living with your parents, because you cannot afford to go into the situation that we have done, who are in our 50s and 60s, be able to buy and whatever. Most of that generation cannot do it. Is that? So enlargement, housing...
So thank you very much. My name is Esther Bollendorf. I'm working for Climate Action Network Europe, so I'm representing civil society. I'm also a compatriot, so moin, Herr Schmit. I'm interested in, so you talked about the Green Deal, you also talked about redistributive aspects, you talked about taxing. So I'm obviously interested in learning from you how you envisage bringing the Green Deal forward, financing the energy transition. We know that it's going to cost a lot. We will need to make it, we will need to have everybody with us. So that's a fair and a just energy transition.
Sure. But what's at the heart of your question? What is it you would like to see?
I want to know. So how is Mr. Schmit going to go about financing the energy transition? Okay. We have an investment gap, a big investment gap. We had Repower EU or the RFF funds.
Okay.
after crisis. So we need more cash. We need public and private cash.
Sure.
Where's the cash going to come
Okay,
from?
but you must, well, if you're not aware, but you know that the Resilience and Recovery Fund, the billions, most of it's still silted up in banks because the governments have not been able to spend it. So I would argue, I mean, you can answer this yourself, but there's enough money in the market.
You want to
It's
answer the question?
No,
for
no,
Herr
what I'm
Schmit?
saying, no, I'll ask it, but I think it's important we educate ourselves that actually there is this billions out there, but sitting in banks because governments have not been able to absorb the cash. But good question.
That's right.
Lady in the back with the glasses.
Hello, thank you very much for having this conversation with us. My name is Ana Rojo Sanchez, and I'm a trainee at the European institutions. And you've mentioned the workers' shortage and as well as the demographic issue as some of the challenges the European Union is facing right now. And I was wondering if, don't you think that migrant population could help address this problem or issue? And don't you also think that the lately adopted migration pact goes against this potential solution? And thank you very much again for your time.
I will come back to you second round, don't worry. No, because he's got to have the opportunity to answer 4 questions first. I'll come back to you, I promise you. So, over to you. Enlargement and then housing.
Well, first enlargement, I think we, especially now, but also for the previous enlargement, we are now in a new geopolitical setting. And it is clear that as European Union, we cannot leave those countries who are interested in joining this union just to say, no, the door is closed. So this is obviously the case for Ukraine very much. Now, we know that this cannot happen tomorrow. I believe that we have to have a more gradual approach also with enlargement. This is the case still with a very unstable area which is called the Western Balkans. But we know that in this region, there are a lot of interests which are not all European interests expressed. So Europe has to deal with that. So I think the formula is obviously to bring in these countries. Can we do that just without doing anything on the institution and so on? No. I think we have to have a targeted institutional reform, which has at least to be linked to the enlargement process. So we cannot just leave the institutions as they stand. For instance, majority voting everywhere seems to me important. Otherwise, we will be blocked in some issues where majority voting is still the rule. Foreign policy is another one. Taxation is one, obviously, where we have to lower the and revise the system which is based on unanimity. On the internal market, here also I am, and the Commission has made proposals on this gradual integration. We will not have day one and then they will be all in and things will be there from day one. So it's important to have this gradual integration. For some countries, by the way, this gradual integration lasts already for some years because the Balkans are in the process. Others have joined, others have problems, as you see, for instance, in Georgia. That's an issue, how you see the rivalry between now Russia and the European Union. On social standards, yes, there has to be an adaptation, there has to be an adjustment in the countries also on social, because social is part of the acquis. And this is one of the big questions. People are very scared about, before it was the Polish plumber, now it may become tomorrow, it's already the Ukrainian farmer, but it may become the Ukrainian plumber or whatever. So we have to make sure also that these countries progressively join the limit or the basic standards in social. So politically, there is one fundamental question. We have to strengthen the democratic orientation of member states. So we are too weak. We have seen it with Poland. We see it with Hungary. We have not enough impact if a country goes authoritarian. And here we really have to strengthen our tools, our rules. We have this Article 7 in the treaty, but it doesn't work if you have two countries. We are blocked because they, even if they do not agree on many things, on that they agree, so they block. So here the values, the democratic fundamental issues have to be strengthened in that perspective. So I think at the end, enlargement will be of a big benefit, not just for the countries, but also for the Union. So I think, as we have seen, by the way, enlargement has helped also the Union. It's not just about the countries, it's also about the existing member states. So I think this gives a new push to the Union. Now, on housing. On housing, this is a central issue. And by the way, the extreme right is taking this issue of housing very much up, linking it to migration, immigration, and so on. So I think Europe can play a more important role. I would not say housing has to become a European competence. Absurd. No, housing remains national, very much regional and especially local. But Europe can do more financially, European Investment Bank, but also cohesion policy. By the way, some member states have taken money from the cohesion fund, have taken money also from the next generation to invest in housing. We have to break this speculative spiral in housing, because this is socially a big issue, but it's also economically an issue. Because if people spend 30–40% of their income for housing, they do not have the money to pay for other things. So this has a negative impact also on the overall economic situation. And my last point on that is we have to regulate the short-term renting. Because more and more in cities, the short-term renting is immobilizing. It's taking out of the normal housing market thousands, tens of thousands of houses, or mainly apartments in cities mainly. So I think this is something which we have really to regulate. I have a lot of contacts with mayors. They come and see me. We have a discussion in the Commission where some of parts of the Commission say, no, that's internal market, that's about freedom. No, it's more than, it's, by the way, also about unfair competition with the hospitality sector.
Exactly.
Because if I have a hotel, I have rules, I have all kinds of regulation. If I just rent my apartment like a hotel room, well, I have no, even some people do not pay any tax on that. So I think we have to do more on housing, crucial. On the Green Deal, yes, the question is about money. Yes, I agree. Now, I think that we can mobilize more private money. This is about organizing the capital market union in Europe. We have a lot of money going outside the union, invested in the US, all over the world, and not enough in Europe, and especially in Europe industry. Because we are talking about industry mainly. We are also talking about households, helping people to better isolation, to change their heating system. And this is really important. If we have the experience, by the way, of Germany, which the beginning of this debate on heating, and which was very, very difficult to correct afterwards. I think we have to support people. And this is about, again, public finance, European finance. We will not make it without an additional next generation. Okay. Draghi says it, and Draghi, I don't believe that he is now automatically a big spender and a socialist, a hidden socialist. No, but he knows very well we have to have a new instrument to accompany public money to. That means also that we have to find new European own resources. Indeed. Because we have still the debt of 700 and plus billion to reimburse, and we will need a new package after 26. So we have to reflect seriously about new own resources. Now, I do not go into the detail. I have a few ideas about that, but I do not go into detail. But we have to have that in mind. Sorry?
About new own resources. And but you're going to keep that under the
on migration pact. Yes, I fully agree. But there are two things. There is the control of migration, which I think we cannot just ignore this dimension. We have to have some control about the flows of migration into Europe. So this is about the pact. The pact you can discuss. There are aspects I do not like so much. That was the best we could get. Unfortunately, some member states were not on this side, had their problems. It's not an equal treatment. Some agree to share the migration flows. Others are not ready to do so. They then have to pay. This is not an ideal thing. But I think it's important now to say, yes, we have to get migration flows under a certain control. That does not mean that we do not need migration. We will need migration.
Indeed.
And those who tell you the contrary, they are those, by the way, who run around the world and try to look for the migrants they prefer. Exactly. So it's Orban, it's Meloni running around and say, well, these are migrants I could take, because they are among the first to need migrants to make their economy run. And that's why we need legal migration. We have to improve our legal migration schemes, because we have to explain to people that we need migration. If Europe wants to keep its prosperity level, if Europe wants to keep our hospitals going,
Indeed.
our public services going, without migration, we will not be able to do it. So I think we have to change this narrative on migration. I am fed up, I say it very bluntly, with this toxic discourse on migration by the extreme right. And I regret that some seem always tempted to do something which is not exactly the same, but think that they can speak more or less the same language and take some profit out of that. Here we have to be very clear. Yes, on control. Yes, on legal migration.
I hope you're tweeting that, all of you. Migration matters, right? And I do hope that outside of this forum that you do this publicly, because the right has taken the stranglehold on this debate, and they're lying. They're lying about the facts. No. Of course it is, but I mean out there, that, we absolutely need migration if Europe's going to be successful. Right, I will take a second round. There's one here. I will take one. I'm going to be random. This is a lottery, okay? 1, 2, gentleman at the back, and the gentleman there. So here. I'll see. Be brief.
Yes.
Because I've got his minders all looking at me saying, he's got to go.
I'll do it. Okay, Commissioner Schmit, thank you so much. This is really inspiring. My name is Andreas Krigianakis. I work at Google as EU Public Affairs Lead. Listening to you speaking about the various skilling that we need in our economy to make it grow, about the various money that has been invested from public funds in order to facilitate growth. We still don't see that growth coming up after especially the COVID years, and as you already mentioned, the US has jumped back after COVID much faster than others expected, etc., etc. I'm going to touch on the issue of regulation, because we are talking about all of these enabling features, skilling, public money, and still we don't see enough growth and innovation in the digital transition. Perhaps smaller companies are finding Europe to be an overregulated area to grow. How do you reflect on that?
Okay, but are you also promoting an IRA for Europe? Because part of the growth trajectory...
I think the money that is there is already a sort of an IRA.
Okay, great, thank you. Gentleman at the back there, along here, yes?
Thank you very much.
Be brief.
Yeah, very brief. I'm Arnaud Foubert from Water Europe. Water is a very complicated topic, but my question is very simple. As the water scarcity strikes Europe, what are your views about water in the next 6 years? Okay. Thank you very much.
Pass the mic to the gentleman to your left.
Water.
Yeah. Water.
Thank you. Jerry McCormick from the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. First of all, could I wish you the best in your election? And I do very much hope you get elected, because it'll be great for Europe and it'll be great for working people. So my best wishes.
There you go.
Just could I make a quick point? We had a poll in Ireland carried out by Europe Movement Ireland, and in that poll 84% of those who were polled in it still support the EU, which I think is very good. Even in Northern Ireland 75%, and they're not even in the EU, support the EU.
Indeed.
And one of the positives as well that came from it was they were very positive about Europe's trade and how it deals with trade and so on. But there was
so your question.
Sorry, the three negatives, and I'd like you to comment on the three negatives. One was on migration, And you answered it already, in fairness to you, and I
Okay.
agree completely with what you said.
Good.
The second one was on Gaza. And of course, in Ireland, it's a really big issue.
I know.
And I don't think anybody can deny that there's genocide taking place in Israel and in the West Bank, in Gaza at the moment. And the EU really needs to do something about it.
Okay.
And they need to start putting sanctions on Israel to stop this murder that's taking place. Thank you.
Thank you. Just hear the lady here. I want to have a bit of gender balance, and then the gentleman at the back with the glasses. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Lolita Kasanin-Grassman. I'm from the Roma Foundation for Europe. Commissioner Schmit, my question is related to the demographic problem and the labor shortages. What is your opinion about investment in European minorities as a solution to labor shortage? For example, did you know that there are 12 million of Roma minority living in Europe, which only 35% of the Roma minority are under the age of 15? That makes them one of the youngest population in Europe. Don't you think that investment into European minority would help the labor shortage in Europe? And by the way, they are not migrants, they are the European citizens.
Indeed.
Thank
Well
you.
done. Thank you. At the back. Final one, sorry.
Okay, thank you. I am the Algerian member of the African group here in Brussels, African group of ambassadors. The African group is particularly concerned about the EU Green Deal. The Green Deal is a set of legislation which will impact negatively the African exports and the African economies, while they are fighting against poverty and making efforts to deal with the ecological challenge. Is it possible for you to make a dialogue with the African group in order to find a balance between the EU concerns and the African concerns with the view to lightening those legislations for the African economies? Thank you.
And what's it? You want a greater power distribution? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about the Green Deal as a whole.
As a whole?
Because those legislations will impact negatively the African exports.
Okay.
I mean, for example, a carbon taxation on the borders, which will not be applied even by the international organization like UNFCCC, was established by European experts without consultation with poor countries and African countries.
Excellent point made.
Thank you.
Really good set of last questions. Not that the first ones weren't, but it's really good diversity. So,
It's my turn.
it's your turn.
Okay. Well, just coming to this thing about overregulation. I think that overregulation certainly may be an issue or is an issue. And I've said, by the way, I was in Germany with a big chemical company. I am ready to have a look at that. And really with industry, with all stakeholders to look what kind of regulation can be skipped or not. This is something I think should be under the supervision, not of some kind of experts or friend coming from I do not know from where, but this should be really under the authority of the president to say, okay, we sit together industry by industry, what kind of regulation can be skipped or is a real handicap without really a benefit for Europe. So when I talk about regulation on asbestos, well, I cannot imagine that this is over-regulation. But maybe there are a lot of regulations which could be eased. I had a meeting now with one sector, and they explained certain things to me, and I said, well, how is it possible you're in a commission? Well, I will not go further on that. I think this is a thing we have to deal with and really look how we can make things easier, simplify also, and especially, and you spoke about new startups. Yes, we have not enough companies in Europe. We are not creating enough companies. Not just in the IT or in this kind of, but in general terms. So really, we have really to reflect how it's about financing, it's about venture capital, it's about the attitude towards creating a company and eventually failing also, which happens, yes. In Europe, that's a big problem. In the US, well, you think about the next idea. So to simplify a bit. So I think this is an issue we have to work on, obviously. Now, thinking that this is the only cause for Europe's difference is wrong, is absolutely wrong, but we should tackle this and look at that. Water, well, water is about Green Deal. Water is about climate. And this is a very serious issue for part of Europe. Now, you have people, I have heard in the European Parliament coming from Spain, from southern Spain, and denying that we are facing a major water problem in Europe. Now, I think this is really something which shows us how important Green Deal is, how important it is to develop new schemes, how to save water, how to retreat water, all the water economy, which, by the way, will create a lot of jobs. Indeed. Because water becomes a real, not just a commodity for free, but water becomes a real economic good, which we should respect and we should treat as an economic good. So I think, but it is a good argument for also, be it agriculture, by the way. And I think there are a lot of schemes where you can save water and better use it. Now, on the support and Gaza, I am very clear on that. And I think that Borrell is very clear on that. First, I always say, what happened on the 7th of October is a terrible crime, terrorist crime, and cannot be excused or whatsoever. That's the first thing. The second one is, I have not, perhaps the Israeli government has, but we should not forget the hostages. Obviously, they are there and they are suffering. This is another issue. Now, what happens in Gaza cannot be excused, cannot be defended, and has to be combated. This is obvious, and Europe cannot criticize or condemn what happens every night in Ukraine, the bombing, and just be soft on what happens in Gaza. And we have to work now on whatever we can, on political solutions and also on pressures not on Israel, on this Israeli government. On this Israeli government. We see how difficult it is for the American, which normally should have more means to pressure. Well, it's difficult. We as Europeans should now have a clear language to this Israeli government and not by any way excuse what is happening now. Kids are starving, civil people, there's no hospital remaining. So this is not against Israel, this is against an Israeli government. Now, on the Green Deal and Africa, well, I would say that the first victim of climate change is Africa. We have already millions of climate refugees in Africa. Now, what obviously we have to limit and we have to decrease fossil energy. That's indispensable. So the countries who have built their economy on fossil energy, well, will have to change their model. Now, we have to help them to change their model because they have other resources they can build a new model. And the new model will be on solar energy, so they have the solar energy for free. I think about your country, which I know a bit, but also Northern Africa or countries in Africa. So I think we have to help, and Europe has to play a full role in Africa in this change of a model. We cannot just say, well, you can go on exporting fossil energy. No, this is not the solution. For nobody, for the whole planet, it's not the solution. But here, and unfortunately, we do not invest enough. There is this fund which is decided by the conferences, which for third world countries to make it easy, and it's not really financed. And this is a responsibility of the international community to do so and help rebuild the economy, especially those built on fossil, with all the problems that creates also in these countries, especially in Africa, to rebuild the economy. So I think Here, Europe has to play an important role. I will not accuse Europe now to block or to... I am very much in favor of a big African strategy for Europe. This is what we need, absolutely. Also, by the way, linked to migration, a big, bold strategy for Africa, a real partnership. This is what we need, also in the geopolitical context. I do not say more. Thank you.
But can you answer the minority question? Because otherwise that would be unfair.
Ah, yes, I forgot. I'm sorry. Yes, I fully agree. I think we launched this strategy for Roma people. I have visited Roma camps in some countries. I was in Bulgaria, I was in Slovakia. And I'm a bit ashamed as a European that this is there. And I think we really have to push for decent lives for these communities, for these people. By the way, well, if you look at this as workforce, that's one aspect. But it's a question of dignity. It's a question of equality. It's a question of non-discrimination. That's a question, finally, of European fundamental values. So this has to be, the policy has to be reinforced. Obviously, we depend also on the member states because people live in member states. So the Commission cannot do everything. We have put on the table this strategy. Now we have to make sure that this is implemented and also observe that the money which is allocated goes really to the communities.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You've done really well. You know, we've worked well enough together. I don't mean it in a patronizing way. You had to be bombarded with very difficult questions. You did brilliantly. I have to say, I hope we're kind of putting the messages out that, you know, Schmit for qualified majority voting, big Africa strategy, Green Deal matters, and minorities matter, but also improving our stance on defense and security, as well as making sure we have a minimum wage and tax distribution, redistribution. So thank you for all of that. And thank you. We wish you well in your journey as you move ahead. And I know that he's looking so nervously at me because you're going to miss your flight, so I need to let him go. So thank you, sir. I just want to say to people here, the next big event, if you want to come to, is our Ukraine Security Forum. On the point that Nicolas made about Ukraine, we are having a major discussion on the 28th about the cost of inaction. What will we lose if we do not continue to support Ukraine? But also, how do we make sure we ratchet up public diplomacy in that regard? So, 28th of May. But we're also going to be in various parts of Europe with our Debating Europe Citizens Platform also. Thank you very much. Take care. Take care.